I have been a volunteer visitor at Harwick Veterans Medical Pavilion for 11 years. I walk the wards on Tuesday and Thursday evenings and overnight on the first Friday of every month. I carry a clipboard, a bag of crossword books, and whatever the chaplain's office gives me to hand out. Travel-size lotion, puzzle magazines, a kind word for the men who don't have family close enough to visit. My name is Warren Ogle. I am 63 years old. I retired from the Army as a 92A, which is a supply sergeant, which means I spent 20 years counting boots and requisitioning field rations and never once got close to anything that would test a man the way this job does. I tell you that because I want you to understand what I am and what I am not. I'm not a doctor. I am not a man who impresses easily. I have walked these halls long enough to think I had seen everything the night could offer. I had not. The fourth floor neurology ward is where Harwick puts the patients who are not in crisis, but are not going home either. Slow decline. Memory work. The men up there are mostly older, mostly quiet, and the nurses assigned overnight are mostly there to monitor, chart, and stay awake. The charge nurse on neuro that first Friday in March, a sharp-shouldered woman named Peg who ran a tight floor and knew it, told me when I came up at 11 that it was going to be a dead night. Her word, dead. Nothing moving up here, Warren, she said. The fill-in showed up for the Colonel Bryce case, and that's about all that's happening. Go ahead and do your rounds. Don't wake the ones who are sleeping. Colonel Bryce, I knew him by reputation only. Retired CW3, Special Forces. 71 years old. He had been admitted 4 days earlier after his son called the VA crisis line. His son had described 6 months of deterioration, confusion, time lapse, a man who kept referring to operations that had ended 20 years ago as if they were happening now. The admitting physician had charted it clearly. Probable early onset Alzheimer's disease, neuropsychiatric referral ordered, family counseling recommended. The night team had adjusted his comfort medications, started him on a mild sedative, and moved him to neuro for monitoring. It was a sad thing, the kind of case that settles into a ward like a stone and stays. I was halfway down the hall, on my way to room 412 to check on a man named Gordy who liked the sports page, when I noticed the light on in room 416. That was the colonel's room. The door was open a few inches. I heard pages turning. I pushed the door slightly and looked in. The fill-in nurse was standing at the bedside table, but she was not looking at the patient. She was reading. Not the chart. She had the chart open on the rolling table, yes, but she had also produced something from her scrub pocket. A small tin notebook, the kind you see men carry in the field, worn at the corners, the cover soft with use. She had it open in her left hand. She was moving her eyes between the notebook and the chart with the focused quiet of someone checking a calculation she already suspected was wrong. She was young, late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back. Her scrubs were teal. Her ID badge said Roland C. RN. I did not know her. I had never seen her on this floor. I almost kept walking. It was not my business. But something in the quality of her stillness stopped me. I have volunteered in enough wards to know the difference between a nurse who is bored and a nurse who has found something. Peg's nurses, when they read charts at this hour, read with the relaxed routine of people who expect nothing to change. This woman was reading the way I had seen ordnance disposal men read a situation, with a focus so complete it had its own temperature. She did not look up. She turned a page in the notebook, then turned back. She picked up the chart and found a section near the back. The medication reconciliation page. I realized later, the one that cross-checked prescriptions against the VA records. She ran her finger down it slowly. Stopped, she said, very quietly, to no one in particular. There it is. She set the notebook on the table, open, face down, and went to the door. She did not run. She moved at that particular pace that nurses use when they do not want to alarm anyone, but are not walking normally either. I stepped back to let her pass. She glanced at me once, registered that I was a volunteer, and said, "Sir, please stay in the hall." Not unkindly, just plainly, and went to the nurse's station. I heard her on the phone within 30 seconds. Then I heard her voice shift into something lower and more precise, and I caught the phrases through the corridor acoustics. Drug interaction, ACE inhibitor, autoimmune presentation. The words did not mean much to me. What meant something was the tone, the flat, load-bearing certainty of a person who has been right about something like this before. Peg came around the corner in under a minute, chart in hand, reading what the fill-in had flagged. I watched Peg's face. Peg had been nursing for over 30 years. She did not startle easily, but she went still in the hallway the way people go still when they realize a door they assumed was closed has been standing open. How did she? Peg started and then did not finish. What the fill-in nurse, Claire Rowland, had found was this, as I pieced it together later from what staff said in the corridor. The colonel had been prescribed a common blood pressure medication at a civilian clinic 8 months ago, a class of drug called an ACE inhibitor. That information was in his VA record, buried 4 pages into a cardiology note from a routine follow-up. The admitting physician on the day of the colonel's arrival had not cross-checked it. The medication the neuro team had then prescribed to ease his agitation interacted with the first in a way that, over days, had produced a cascade that mimicked Alzheimer's onset with near-perfect fidelity. The confusion, the time displacement, the behavioral shift, but was not Alzheimer's at all. It was autoimmune encephalitis driven by the drug interaction. Reversible if you caught it. Catastrophic if you did not. 6 doctors had looked at this man in 4 days. None of them had found it. Claire Rowland had been on the ward for 40 minutes. I learned later, from the attending who was called in from home at midnight, that she had recognized the pattern from a case she'd worked in Kandahar province. A soldier whose presentation after a field-dispensed medication interaction had looked exactly like a traumatic brain event, and whom she had kept alive for 9 hours without a physician, without a lab, using a worn memorandum book of clinical notes she'd built over 2 deployments. She had not mentioned this to anyone. She had simply seen the pattern, confirmed it against her notes, and moved. The next 2 hours were not chaotic. That was the thing that struck me most, standing in the hallway doing what the volunteer coordinator would almost certainly call overstepping. There was no code call, no running, no crash cart in the corridor. There was Claire Rowland at the center of a sequence of careful, methodical steps. The medications adjusted, the protocol changed, the overnight attending on the phone with her every 15 minutes. The colonel slowly, incrementally brought back from wherever the wrong prescription had sent him. Peg ran the floor around her. The attending deferred to her read on the interaction because she was right and everyone in that corridor understood it. At 2:30 in the morning, the colonel opened his eyes clearly for the first time in 4 days. He looked at the ceiling. He said, in the dry voice of a man waking from a long sleep, "What day is it?" Claire told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That can't be right." "It is," she said. "Huh," he said, and went back to sleep. But it was a different sleep. Anyone in that room could feel the difference. I went down to the family waiting area at 3 and stayed. I'm not sure why. I told myself I was doing my job, making sure the family had coffee, someone to sit with. The colonel's son was there, a tall man in his early 50s, James Bryce, a retired Army colonel himself, who had flown in from Georgia 2 days ago when a neurologist's prognosis had turned serious. He had been in the waiting area in a canvas jacket and worn jeans, with the particular stillness of a man who has accepted a hard thing and is now just waiting to see how hard it gets. I told him his father's condition had changed. I am not a medical person, and I did not try to explain it medically. I said, "The nurse on tonight found something. You should go in." He looked at me for a long second. Then he stood and walked down the hall. I followed at a distance. I do not know why. Call it 11 years of institution, making a man curious about how things end. James Bryce stopped in the doorway of room 416. His father was sitting up, the first time in 4 days, with the overhead light low and a cup of water on the table beside him. Claire Rowland was at the rolling chart table near the window, writing her notes. She had not turned on the bright light. She was working in the quiet. The colonel looked at his son in the doorway and said, "James, what are you doing here?" James Bryce's face did what faces do when a thing you have prepared yourself to lose turns out to still be there. He stood in the doorway and did not come through it for a moment. His jaw moved once. He pressed his hand flat against the doorframe. He looked at Claire Rowland. She had turned from chart. She was looking at him with the composed attention of someone who understood exactly what this moment was and was not going to make it smaller by speaking. James Bryce straightened. He was a retired colonel. He He had spent 30 years knowing when something deserved a full and proper response. He put his heels together. He brought his hand to his temple in a salute, clean, correct, the kind that comes from the body's own memory, and held it. Claire Rowland looked at him for a moment. She gave a small, simple nod. That was all. He went into his father. I heard the old man's voice, ragged and dry and entirely present, say something about the date again. I heard James Bryce laugh, the short, helpless laugh of relief. Then the door was mostly closed, and I was standing in the hallway alone. Peg was at the nurse's station. She had her reading glasses off, which she only did when she was not trying to look like everything was normal. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything useful. I went and found Claire Rowland in the break room at 3:45. She was drinking coffee from a paper cup and reviewing something in that small tin notebook. She looked up when I came in. I asked her how she'd known. I know it was not my place, but I had been in those halls a long time, and I had never seen anything like what I'd just seen, and I am old enough now to know that when something like that happens, you should ask, because there are not many nights like that in a life. She thought about it for a moment. I saw a soldier present this way once, she said. Kandahar, second deployment. No lobby, no physician, no backup. I had my notes and I had time. I had to figure out what it was before it killed him. She paused. It's the same pattern. Once you've seen it, you don't mistake it. She said it without pride. The way a carpenter talks about a joint that went right. A thing done because she knew how. I asked if she had told the attending about her background. He didn't ask, she said, and went back to her coffee. I thought about that on the drive home at 6 in the morning with the gray light coming up over the highway. I thought about what it means that a man can spend 4 days in a ward full of trained physicians, heading towards something irreversible, and the thing that saves him is 40 minutes with a woman in teal scrubs carrying a worn-tan notebook in her pocket. I thought about James Bryce's salute in that doorway, precise and unhurried and entirely without a word, and the small nod she gave back, and how much was in both of those things. I have been walking those halls for 11 years. I have seen men come back from hard places. I have seen families receive news they did not want. I have given out crossword books in the middle of the night and held the hands of men who were alone. I have not seen anything like Claire Rowland. I will not pretend I understood, standing in that hallway, the full weight of what she had done in Kandahar, or the 9 hours she had spent keeping men alive with nothing but her training in that notebook. I was a supply sergeant. I counted things, but I understood the salute. I understood what James Bryce was saying with it, that he had spent his career in service, and he knew what it looked like when someone had earned something the world had not gotten around to acknowledging yet. And I understood, watching her receive it with nothing more than a quiet nod and then go back to her chart notes in the low light, that she was not waiting for the world to catch up. She never had been.